So this is an episode of firsts, really. The New Levels Coaching podcast combining with the RunThrough Trails podcast. We thought there's no better setting to do this in the mountains. And I'm going to kick off by firstly appreciating where we are. James has come up top trumps here. We have got an amazing setup with a beautiful backdrop and quite fitting, really, because the OCC is a week today, which is a race James is going to do. We're going to talk a lot about, no doubt. And the back half of the course is right behind us in that backdrop. So an amazing setting for a collab podcast with New Levels Coaching and RunThrough Trails. James and I are co-hosts on the RunThrough Trails podcast, and James is an athlete who I coach and I support as part of New Levels Coaching. He's here to compete in the OCC at UTMB, and we thought, you know what? There's no better place and there's no better time to do an athlete interview. But I also wanted to share James's story because it's an inspirational story. It's not just going to be all about the OCC and UTMB. We are going to touch on his past and how he got into athletics and running and now how he's onto the trails. But firstly, I'm going to start by asking him a new question. I'm going to put him on the spot. I usually ask James a positive, but we always talk about on New Levels Coaching podcast, we provide coaching, inspiration and education. So I'm going to ask you, is there one person, or there might be multiple, but certainly pick out one person who's provided you with inspiration in your athletics or running career so far?
Cool. Yeah, good question. Hello, first of all. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and obviously welcome to our podcast as well. It's a bit of a two-way one, as Lewis mentioned. Inspiration in my athletic journey. I mean, the one that comes to mind is the person who got me into trail running. It's Mike Murphy. I've spoken about him before. So Mike is, he was like an elite trail runner himself. He's based out in Squamish. He's from like Vancouver area. Well, he's from Saskatchewan, but he lives in Vancouver area. And he owns a running store called Capra Running, which is in Squamish. I bought my first pair of trail running shoes from him. I bought the wrong ones and went back, and he kindly just replaced them with a completely different shoe. And he was the first person who took me out, got me on a structured session. He was the first person who said, look, you've got some potential. First person who pushed me into doing a race. And he used to say stuff like, oh yeah, you'll be fine. You know, you'll be in this position. You'll be running this time. You've got a lot of talent for it. And I just thought it was not the case at all. So he was definitely the first person who inspired me, gave me the confidence. And he had a very kind of unique philosophy when it came to trail running and his attitude to running. And he's just an absolute character, absolute legend, nicest guy ever. And yeah, huge inspiration. I still message him before every race. He somehow knows where I am and when I'm racing at all times, regardless of having not even spoken to him for probably 3 years. So yeah, just legend, really good mate, and yeah, inspirational.
I love that, because those people who inspire us, and I guess those people who get us into the sport, really, they often stay connected with us throughout our journey, and they're always watching, like old coaches, old friends. They're always tracking you wherever you go, and that's a really good example of it. I don't want to intro James too much. I've given a little bit away already. I actually want James to give us a little bit of background about himself, a bit more about what his life looked like before running, how he got into running. But I do just want to kind of give you a few top line things around James's past running history before we go further back than that. 2:21 marathon runner, having ran that in Valencia and London Marathon. He then converted to the trails, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. He's qualified for the elite start at OCC at the UTMB. That's the 50K distance. There's 3 of the World Series finals here at the UTMB. We've got the OCC, the CCC, and the UTMB itself. There's lots going on during the week, but James will be competing over the 50K. He won the UTS at Snowdonia this year, and this year in 2024, he got the chance to represent Great Britain at the mountain running champs, the Europeans over there in Annecy. So a brilliant 2024 since he went to the trails in 2023. I'm going to hand over to James now to tell us a little bit more about, well, where did this journey start, James? Because I think this is the intriguing part of the podcast for me.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I kind of alluded to it before that I started seriously trail running in Canada, but you have to kind of rewind a little bit. So, I mean, it's fitting that we're sat in Chamonix right now. To rewind really far back and just give a very brief overview. Always sporty as a kid, sporty family. My dad played rugby. Every weekend we spent, me and my brother, with my dad and all my mates at the rugby club. Saturdays he played and we messed around. Sundays we played and he coached. I was, captain of the rugby team, fly off, used to do a lot of mountain biking, got into skiing at quite a young age, around 10 years old. And my dad sort of got us into that as well. So we started going skiing every year. And I was very much of that kind of like rock music, Kerrang, Q on the TV, snowboard movies, ski movies, mountain bike movies, like extreme sports, early 20s, early 2000s type of thing. Like I'm 37 now, so that would have been my early teenage years, was like around the year 2000. So yeah, very much that kind of scene. So really active, but never running clubs, never athletics, never organised sport in that sense outside of rugby. Played for all the school teams, but like the school wasn't an amazing level, so anyone who was keen on sport could play cricket and football and whatever. And then essentially like went off to uni, had a kind of total change of lifestyle. Started going out and drinking as you do, but like diet got really bad. Put on a bit of weight through university, and then kind of did physics at uni in Leeds, came back, took on the family business, and my wife, well, now wife, then girlfriend Nicola, and me moved into our first house, and we got a dog, bought a house in Nantwich where we'd kind of been born and raised, and we thought this is our career track now, this is our life, we're sort of set up for it. But I just don't think either of us were particularly excited about the future or particularly engaged with what we were doing. And weirdly now, I can't really relate to it. It's like talking about a different person. I've had this chat a few times with you and with other people, and it's just an odd thing to try and explain, because I found myself down a bit of a tunnel of bit depressed, smoking 20 to 40 cigarettes every day, going to work early, not really enjoying what I was doing at work, not feeling motivated to really do anything, going home, staying up way too late, eating a load of rubbish food, not sleeping enough, getting up, and just in this like cycle. And ended up 15 stone, smoking 40 cigarettes a day, drinking a bit too much, and just not a healthy, happy person, really. And yeah, I guess that's the background to what then led into a bit of a kind of complete turnaround lifestyle change, which was based around my dad. Actually, it seems now as I'm chatting about it, kind of led me through this entire kind of journey. He was also like a little bit overweight. He'd played hooker, so it was that sort of build, like that stocky, like hooker build. But he wanted to get a bit fitter, and he started going to the gym and doing some personal training sessions, lost a bit of weight, got quite into it. And he bought me a pass for 10 sessions with a personal trainer. And they were always really supportive, and no one ever really called me out like, James, look, you've let yourself go, you're a mess, what are you doing? But it was like implied I was very unhealthy. And one day just decided, after years of literally years, and for people who are like in this situation now, which I'm sure some of you might be, who are listening, it's easy to say, woke up one day, changed it, and just dropped all the weight and changed my lifestyle and just did it like that. And that kind of is what happened. But that was prefaced with years of going to bed every night thinking, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And then waking up and doing nothing about it and doing the same whole thing again. So it's easy to say you just get up and do it. And one day you will, and you can. And I did. But it took a long time, hundreds of days of thinking, what are you doing? Why don't you just do something? Why don't you just do something? Before I then kind of took that step, took those classes, and then it all just changed from there.
So that is for me the fascinating part, because people who are watching on YouTube will be looking at you thinking, hang on, did he just say 15 stone? Did he just say smoking 20 to 30 cigarettes per day? Now he's competing in the elite race at OCC. He's ran close to 220 marathon. Like, it doesn't look like the same person. And you touched on it there. It doesn't feel like the same person. But I think your overriding message here, James, and the one I want to get across is there's a lot of people out there who are probably in a similar situation where they don't, I guess they don't agree with everything in their life, and they're a little bit scared to change it. And one thing I hear a lot from people is, oh, now's not the right time. But you said you spent a lot of time thinking about that. So when was it the right time for you, or was there never a right time? Was it just that trigger of 10 PT sessions from your dad that started that trigger? And I really like a saying that came from the High Performance podcast, that often motivation comes from the action and not the opposite way around. Is that what then started it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, nowadays I listen to a lot of that type of stuff, whether it's business related or personal development, or I'm always trying to do a lot of stuff, and I'm quite engaged with like reading and learning and listening to podcasts and different things like that about how you can kind of live a more fulfilled life and achieve and do all this stuff, like all this personal growth stuff and professional development. But then I didn't think about any of that stuff at all. I wasn't looking at it at all. And if I'm honest, if there was a specific spark, I've forgotten what it was. I couldn't actually tell you what it was. All I know is it was those 10 personal trainer sessions. And I think it was genuinely just a thought of like, I've always been competitive. So I think being given that was almost a nod of like, are you going to give this a go? You're going to do this? And so I'd never turn down a challenge. I still, even when I was unhealthy and massively overweight and not particularly happy, I probably still thought I was like a bit of an athlete. Like, it's a weird mindset. Like, it's a strange thing to come to terms with, but I never felt like a different person. Just externally, I appeared that way. And I guess, yeah, I don't know. It just came to that breaking point. I got given a challenge, given an opportunity, and just decided I'm going to do this. And I think going to that session, a lot of it came down to who the trainer was as well. It's this guy called Ollie. I kind of liked him, connected straight away. I liked what he was about, and we just dived into it. And it really, like, it drew out my competitive side, and he was challenging me to push myself. And it gamified it as well, because it wasn't just seeing numbers on a scale come down. It was seeing, well, you can't even do one pull-up. Starting off doing negative pull-ups and then getting to the point of doing more than 20 for reps. I like that. It's that, like, progression, that gamification, that challenge. So I think for me, it was just that as soon as the momentum was there through the action, it became easy. It was a no-brainer. You would have had to pay me £1 million to eat a chocolate bar, because I was just fully chicken breast, rice, broccoli every day. As soon as I started to see that weight come down and started to feel better, it was easy. That was just like, that was who I was, you know?
That's really interesting that you responded to the competitiveness of it because of your personality. And I think it's a really interesting point for people who are tuning in and listening. I think it's really important for them to understand a couple of those key messages is like, find things that suit your personality in order to challenge you. Whether that's picking the right training methods for you when you're training, whether it's picking the right running sessions for you, whether it's picking the right coach, and that's something you've already touched on. Like, you got a PT who, it was probably a personality match there. He probably knew how to challenge you as well, and you got on well together, and that is part of the process. I also want to say at this point, like, don't be afraid if you sat at home and you've tried these things before and they've not worked first time. Like, I speak to some people who've maybe tried to work with a nutritionist or a sports psychologist and it's not worked first time, but the person will be out there. Just keep committing to it. You were quite fortunate. The first one was one that you had a match with, which was great. But I'm sure there's been other instances along the years where you've not quite clicked with something first time and you've kept going. But what I love about this is it still comes down to choices for me, and you made a choice to do it. And that's the biggest thing here is, if people want to make significant change, they want to lose a lot of weight. Because if you don't mind me asking, James, what do you weigh now compared to the 15 stone you were?
I don't know in stone, but like more like 9. I guess, I think I was 92 kilograms at my heaviest, and now I'm like 58 or something.
So 64 kilos is about 10 stone. So yeah, in the 9 stone. So it goes to show it's almost like 100% reduction, which is absolutely mental, absolutely crazy. But it's easy to look at the end result and not see all the hard work that goes into it. And that's what I want to go on to now, the hard work that went into it. So it was PT sessions. There was that outdoor activity lifestyle, I guess, and kind of going full circle to where you started. Eventually you even ended up back in the mountains. You mentioned Mike Murphy. Like, how did that come about? How did you end up back in Squamish in Canada, or in Squamish in Canada, I should say?
Well, like, momentum's a weird thing, because as soon as those numbers started to come down, as soon as it was that, as you were talking, I just remembered one more thing that it was as well. It was a commitment. So instead of it being, I'm going to go home and do 100 sit-ups, I'm going to go home and run 5K, it was like a financial, personal commitment where he was texting me, see you tomorrow. I'm not going to let him down. And my dad was going, so we were talking about it. So that, like, there's a level of, like, commit to it financially, commit to it emotionally, like, commit to it with someone else who you're close with. Tie yourself into it so you can't give up, because the hardest thing is just getting through those first few weeks. It's all about comfort. Like, for me, eating was comfort. If I felt down, I'd eat. If I was bored, I'd eat. Well, that's normal for a lot of people. It's still me now. That hasn't changed at all. I just do it in a more, like, moderated way now. But there's no question, it wasn't go and do it and it was immediately easy. It was go and do it, and every minute of every day for, let's say, 2 weeks was very difficult. And then after that, it was easy. You just got to, like, break through. It's exactly the same when people talk to me about running who don't run, and they're like, I wish I ran. Like, I wish I was into running. It looks so fun. It's so free. But I go for a run. I hate it. How can you enjoy it? I'm like, yeah, the first few runs are going to be grim. You got to just run a couple of times a week for a few weeks, break through that, because you need that base level of fitness for it to be enjoyable. But it isn't going to come easy. But then again, what is going to come easy that's worth doing? I've forgotten what your question was.
Well, I asked about getting full circle back to the mountains and back to Squamish. But I'm going to touch on that point one bit. I really like the bit about committing to things and committing to people. The accountability partner for me is massive. And you had two there. You had your dad and you had the PT. And I think some people try and box things up and keep everything to themselves. And they don't, it's not about getting a coach sometimes, but it's about having that accountability partner, whether it's a partner, a family member, whoever it might be, your training partner. But doing it together or in groups sometimes just helps to get that momentum rolling. So yeah, the original question was, how did you end up in Squamish, and what was that journey to kind of running looking like? Because I think that's where you took up running, according to that story to do with Mike earlier on that you said.
Yeah, totally. It was interesting really, because I had that full lifestyle change. I lost all that weight, and I reckon it was probably in the space of 12 months I lost about 5 stone. And I did do it in a relatively safe and sustainable way. I'd have to go back and like do the maths and see if I lost £2 a week for blah, blah, blah. I wasn't thinking about it too much like that. I was definitely trying to lose as much as I could, but it was by no means like starve myself or being weird about it. I was trying to eat perfectly, exercise 3-4 days a week. I was still smoking. So it's not like it's that easy to give it all up and all of a sudden everything's perfect. I committed to one piece, which was the diet and the fitness and losing the weight, and the smoking was like another mountain to cross another time, and that came a couple of years later. But yeah, I lost all the weight, felt better physically. The next time we went skiing, all of a sudden everything felt easier. I could jump higher, I could turn more easily. Like life was just easier, right? Your body is your vehicle to experience life in so many ways, and everything about it was better. People were like happy to see me. They were congratulating me. I was speaking to people. I just felt good. I felt happy. But from a work point of view, for me and Nicola as well, I'm for like to be kind of somewhat open, like from a relationship point of view, it didn't really solve anything because I got quite addicted to that process. And I was already being selfish in my own way, but the selfishness didn't really reduce. So it was still all about me. And we kind of had a few struggles for a period there, even after I'd lost the weight, and I was kind of happier because of that. So we kind of actually ended up parting ways for a little bit, and she really wanted to go traveling. So she decided, right, like, you know, we're breaking up. It's a big life change. I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to go backpacking around Southeast Asia. Always wanted to do it. And me having no imagination and kind of being in bits over the breakup, decided to just copy her. So I left first. I shot off in May, I think it's 2013. And yeah, just did the whole, went to Thailand with a backpack with it for a year and traveled through all of Southeast Asia, did my dive master certifications in Thailand. I did Muay Thai kickboxing camps, like sleeping on the mats in the Philippines, went out to Australia, went all around Indonesia, Malaysia, met loads of people, but a motorbike, drove through Vietnam. Like that was absolutely earth-shatteringly like life-changing experience. And what I realized, a few things. I realized people everywhere are just the same. They're just living in a different way. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. Even though I'd traveled a lot on holidays, I didn't quite appreciate like how true that was and how you can engage with all these different people. I've always been quite introverted and not the most social. I'd find it awkward to walk into a bar and strike up a conversation with somebody. I've had close friends, but I've never been an extrovert by any means. So dropping myself into a hostel was terrifying. Like that was really scary. And that was like more of a challenge than the weight loss, to be honest, just being by myself for a year. I kept a diary and I've looked back at it a few times since, and there's like notes in there from sat in the departure terminal at Manchester Airport waiting to get on the flight to go, just like, what am I doing? Where am I going? I didn't have a hostel booked. I didn't even know what I was doing. I had one flight. That was it. And it was the best thing I could have ever done. I learned so much about myself, and just realized what I wanted to do. I wanted to make the most of life and travel and meet people and do cool stuff. And then long story short, like full cycle, I mentioned being into skiing earlier, and I'd always wanted to do a ski season. I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever to be a ski instructor. So I thought, whatever, I'm just going to do that. So I did my dive master certification in Thailand to be a dive instructor. And then I flew out to Whistler and did a ski season. Just absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And off the back of that, at the same time, Nicola had come back from backpacking and she reached out. We'd been in touch a little bit. We'd met up briefly during, and like long story short, we decided to give it another go. So the next day I was on a flight. I flew back to the UK. We got back together and we said, right, we're different people now. What are we going to do? And we said, we've always talked about living in the mountains. We love skiing. We love France. We love travel. Let's set up a travel business in Chamonix and just move there tomorrow. So we like put some money into it. We set up this company, found an apartment and just moved out. And we ended up living in Chamonix for 2 winter seasons, October to May. We gave this business a go, like learned a lot from that. It wasn't wildly successful. It wasn't really a load of purpose behind it. But what it did was expose us to this place, which still to this day is my favorite place in the world. And through being here and my link with snowboarding, and one of my best mates, Tom, being really into mountaineering, started doing a bit of ski touring and realized this is incredible. Like, you can travel through these mountains that you can see in the background, pass over this terrain, these glaciers, like get to these places where very few people can be, and then ski back down completely under your own power. That's all I want to do with my life. It's like, that is the happiest I've ever been, is doing that. But to walk up a 3,000-meter mountain with skis and a heavy pack on your back, you've got to be pretty fit. And that long way around led me to trail running, and it was literally a tool that I could use in the summers to get fit for the winter's ski touring. And kind of ended up on a path to becoming a ski guide, because I loved it so much, and that took me to Japan, where I did a season, and eventually brought us around to Canada, mainly because that's where we could get work holiday visas. So I mean, there was a trip around Europe for a few months, living in the van in the middle of there, and a few other bits and pieces. But yeah, we committed to Canada. A few friends had told me about a place called Squamish, just north of Vancouver. It was near to Whistler, which I'd been skiing to Whistler. It's like, one of the best places in the world. Squamish had this amazing mountain biking, trail running scene. It's just this cool place. And yeah, it was just a time of life where we were just willing to throw it all out there and risk it. So we moved out with no plans other than wanting to be there.
I've heard this story now maybe 5, 6, 7 times. We've done live interviews. Obviously, when I first met you, you told me about it. We've shared many trips together and asked yourself and Nicola about this story. And for me, 1, it never gets old. 2, one thing always strikes me. It's like, you were lost to become found. Like, you were literally lost with your lives, and then you found yourselves and what you love doing. And that passion still shines through today. And I'm so glad you did, because then our paths obviously crossed eventually because of that. But also, I think it shows a few things around being more cultured. I think we both come from an environment, a community where we're probably a little bit sheltered, and my parents were amazing with taking me on holiday and things, and grandparents and aunties and uncles. We holidayed all the time. But I would say, until I went to university and actually started traveling more and getting out and meeting people, as you described, I would say I wasn't the most cultured. I was actually a bit sheltered by my upbringing, and it was the best thing I've ever done to go and explore. And I think some people are afraid of it, and it is shit scary, like you said. I'm so glad you mentioned you keep a diary, because I tell all our athletes to keep a diary, because it's so good just to look back on how you were feeling on certain days before races or before you were getting on a flight. That's so cool to look back on that and think, how was I actually feeling? Because it's easy to look back and go, yeah, I had the time of my life, but at the start, I didn't really want to do it, but force myself into it and look at the change it made. And then with the trail running, obviously that came as a fitness thing. And I'm going to kind of jump forward, because you kind of found trail running to help with the ski touring and then the guiding. But that was also because of the environment you're in, right? Because you're in the mountains. And then you decided to go like full circle and go to road running, which is the complete opposite to me, because I've done it the other way. So I'm just intrigued by that part. And I'm sure our listeners are, because you went from this awesome mountain area to then on the roads and also living back in the UK.
Yeah, it was an interesting turn of events. So we were in Canada for 5 years, and we got our permanent residency, and we were sort of set up there. We had a really good group of friends. We loved it. Every place has its ups and downs, but it's a special place. Like, it's unbelievable. But yeah, around COVID time, we had a baby. So me and Nicola, we've now been married for 5 years. I think it's our, well, I don't think, whoops. It is our 5-year anniversary on the 7th of September coming up, in about a week or so from the time we're recording this podcast. So yeah, we'd flown back to Portugal, got married with a group of friends, and we'd been together for a long time. But that was a really special thing, and we'd always talked about having kids. So we came back and we decided, like, now's the time. We're in our early 30s. We're well set up. We're happy with who we are as people. We're not exactly where we're going to be forever, but like, let's do it. And it was the right decision for sure. But it was like a shockingly challenging experience, which, as I'm saying that now, sounds ridiculous, because who would think that having a child and raising a kid would be anything other than insanely challenging? But I can't describe to you, like, the shock of how much that changed our lives. We went from these free-spirited travel, like happy-go-lucky, do whatever, out ski touring every day, kind of can do whatever you want to do, complaining about being a bit bored, to having zero time and having a baby who, I mean, Amelia's incredible, but she was not an easy baby. She was really colicky for 6 months. She cried all night, every night. She wouldn't sleep. So we just had a bit of a nightmare, and it was COVID. We were in a 1-bed apartment. She was sleeping in a crib in a makeshift, like, wardrobe. We'd do shifts where I'd stay up till 4 a.m. in the morning with her on me, because she wouldn't sleep if you put her down, and then Nick would come out and swap. It was a struggle. And for me, I wanted to be there so much that I didn't really mind, and I got a bit of a personality where I can kind of just like battle through stuff. And I had this one track mentality of I'm going to be a ski guide. That's going to be my life. That's my path, my vocation. But for Nick, I'd kind of dragged her along with me. She loved being there, but it wasn't her passion like it was for me. So she finds herself with a baby, not doing her job anymore, having a real bit of a struggle, and her parents can't come out and visit for a couple of years because it's COVID. And all of a sudden, like West Coast of Canada felt like a long way away. So yeah, she suggested maybe it's time we move back and we get closer to family and kind of reassess what we're doing in life. Ski guiding isn't the safest career. Like, few people died. There was multiple deaths every year. I mean, we're sat in a place that's known as the extreme sport death capital of the world. I think there's 60 fatalities a year in the Chamonix Valley alone from avalanche burials and crevasse fall and whatever, paragliding accidents and stuff. So yeah, it didn't seem like a sustainable career. And she was just sort of ready for a change. It had just been a hard period. So at first I thought she was joking. I couldn't believe she'd even suggest it. But eventually we kind of like, we sat down and did a bit of a SWOT analysis and plus and minus and said, well, it can't always be about me. So let's go with the thing that makes sense and let's prioritize the family and see. So yeah, we ended up back in Nantwich and ended up buying a house in the town where we both grew up, which I can't believe we even did, but it made sense at the time. We had all that grandparent support, which was incredible. Amelia got to spend a lot of time with the grandparents, and we kind of saw ourselves coming back and like moving to Keswick or moving to North Wales and finding the Squamish of England, finding that community, finding that outdoor world, and just having a slight change, but not as much of a change as we thought. But it didn't work out that way. We just couldn't find the right place. It didn't really seem to exist, and Nantwich seemed like the lesser of many evils. And so the only thing that I could do while I was there was run, and the running in Cheshire is flat road running. So it wasn't even that I really wanted to. It just seemed like the appropriate thing to do.
And that's what I find interesting is that you'd found running, and it was such a big part of your life now that was the continuum here. So like you gave up ski guiding, obviously, because you're not in the mountains. You came back to be closer to parents. But the one thing that you'd found later on in life, and you had found it later in life, in your 30s, is the one thing that you wanted to carry on. And you said earlier about people who maybe don't take to running straight away, but I do find most people who stick with it find a love for it. And then they don't want to lose that love because it's a bit like an addicted drug. You don't really regret a run when you're out. So it might be a different form of running you've taken up when you get back, but it's still, especially with you and your competitive edge as well, I know that as soon as you put yourself into something, you're going in it and you want to know how I can be better. So I know that as soon as you went to the roads and you've gone to marathon, you're thinking, right, I want to be better at this. But it was a pretty quick transition, and you did have quite quick success. And back to the original inspirational person in your life, Mike Murphy, who said, oh, I think you've got a bit of a talent for this. Like, you clearly did, because you went quite quickly to the marathon and had some quite, well, very, very impressive results very quickly. And also started notching up a few international vests as well on the road. So just touch on that for me, about that commitment to that road scene and then how that quickly escalated. And I guess that would probably lead us on to how we eventually met.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It's all weaving together. No, I was so, I can't describe how naive I was to the running world. Like, you've got to understand, I came to running through mountaineering and ski guiding. I read Steve House and Scott Johnston's book, Scott, Tom Evans' coach, because I wanted to be a fitter, better mountain athlete to ski guide, because that was all I wanted to do, all I thought about, all I talked about. I literally only started running as a tool for that. I followed all these protocols they had with weighted backpack hikes. I was doing like trying to find my easy pace by breathing through my nose, and I was just doing this structured training plan from this book, because again, I can be quite like disciplined. I can be very disciplined with stuff, and I knew I had a goal, and I had a book with an expert telling me this is how you achieve that goal. You just do these things. So I just did those things, and I think I'd learned that specifically from losing weight. Of, eat chicken, rice, and broccoli, go to the gym, run, sleep well, look after yourself, you'll lose weight, you'll be happy, you'll be healthier. I'd seen that success. So it's just like an equation. I'm a mathematician at heart. It was like, do long, easy runs, don't push it, build up volume safely, follow this training plan, do the strength work. And all of a sudden I'm seeing like easy run pace just go up for no more effort. And all this stuff is coming true, which then just solidifies it more and more. And then Mike's in my ear saying, no, you're going to be really good. You should do a race. And I hated the idea of racing. I really had no interest. And I went and did my first 50K before I left it in Whistler. And I came like 8th overall. I mean, it's not like a deep field. The time isn't anything special, but it was like, okay, that's pretty good. And yeah, it was just, layering on kind of experience, discipline, and then seeing the success come, it becomes obvious. It's like, I want to achieve these things. I'll do this stuff. I'll achieve those things. And yeah, with the road running coming back, so knew nothing about the UK club scene. I had no PBs. I'd never raced a 5k, 10k, half marathon, marathon. I'd run 250k trail races. That was my first races I'd ever done. I had no concept. We used to go on Tuesdays and do speed sessions at the local football pitch, and it was like, whatever, maybe it's an 800-meter rep around the pitch. I don't even know. We'd do it on grass in trail shoes and just do what Mike told me to do. I didn't know what strides were. We'd do these warm-ups and like, what are these weird like sprints we're doing? And I was not running fast. I had no concept of what fast was. And I remember coming back, I joined the running club in Nantwich because I thought, right, I'll apply these things I've learned. I went traveling and I put myself out there, made friends, and it was better. So I'll come back, I'll join a running club, I'll make friends. That would be cool. I'll meet new people. I also knew that like I may as well try some road running because I'd had success on the trails. I wanted to see kind of how that translated and what that would mean. I wanted to run a marathon because who doesn't? You know, it's like such a basic thing in running. And I did I was doing my own training. I quite enjoyed learning and reading about it. And I went and did like a 5k, 3x5k session or something around this like golf course housing estate. And like the last rep I ran 16:30 for the 5k or whatever. It again means nothing to me. It was just like a tempo rep or something. I remember going to the running club for the next easy run, and everyone's like whispering and going, "Oh, see that session, James? Did you see that? See that 5k rep?" Like, what are you talking about? I had no concept of what was good or bad, or like I had no idea. And that was when I met Graham Greene. So I got the job at RunThrough, which we kind of skipped over, but the running was the link. So I went to the running club to meet friends. I did the running to keep me motivated because I was depressed to leave one of the best places in the world. I left literally my vocation, my favorite thing in the world. So the one thread I could hang on to was the running. So I was like, I'm doubling down on this running. I started watching videos about people running on tracks, videos about marathon runners and people going to the Olympics, switched off from all the trail stuff, switched off from all the skiing, didn't think about mountains, didn't want to look at it, didn't want to think about it, put all the books away, couldn't really stomach it. And so just doubled down on the road running and looked for jobs in running, applied for a job with Brooks, got turned down, and then applied for a job with RunThrough, went and met Matt and Ben in Manchester, interviewed by Rob, who's obviously like really close colleague, and yeah, took that job and loved it. I had no experience of events, but it was tied in with running, and it's just me and Graham driving around on courses, chatting about running, learning about the club scene, him saying the names of all these people who I should have known. I'd never heard of anybody, man. Anybody. It was embarrassing, but he sort of educated me on that and said, you should do this, you should do that. And it was actually Graham and Matt and Ben who pushed me towards, you should get a coach, you need a coach. And they said it enough times where then it was like, you should speak to Lewis. And obviously then we met at Cannock, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, and I'll come on to that in a second, but I do just want to touch on something all the way back in the first ever episode that we recorded of the New Levels Coaching podcast. Obviously, this is going out on both platforms. But Gemma and I spoke about how running changed our lives, the both of us, in more ways than one, and ultimately brought us together, really. And you've just described it so eloquently as well about how running has changed your life as well, and how it dictated what you did, and despite still being unaware of all these top people and really being quite naive to it, which I quite liked, you still use running as that tool to help shape your life. And I think it doesn't matter what standard anybody is, whether it's traveling the world for races, whether it's just going and meeting people and having social runs, whether it's going on retreats or workshops that we put on, for example, I think running can be such a good tool for people. And that's what inspired us to set up the coaching business, because we get to surround ourselves with people who think and, I guess, act in the same way as we do, positive, like-minded people, as we say. And that's what led us to each other, Graham pushing you. And I remember the first call we had before Cannock, and I came off the call and I was adamant that I wasn't going to work with anybody because I was pretty much at max capacity. And Gemma kept saying to me, you can't work with anybody else, you're overrun. And I came off this call and I just said, but I've just spoken to this guy, James. And I was like, I've just got a really good feeling about this. And she's like, okay. And then I met you at Cannock, and yes, we started that journey, and you had some brilliant success over the marathon, particularly in Valencia, getting down to 2:21. And then you replicated that in London, 2:21 again, in definitely a tougher course, worse conditions by an absolute mile. We knew you were in really good shape. And I'm going to fast forward, because not long after that, we were actually training for another marathon block into Valencia. we happened to be down in Snowdon for a race that your dad was doing, and I'd entered Gemma for a birthday. You'd done a session the day before. When we arrived on the road, we drove past you as you were doing the session. I thought, God, he looks good. He's in good nick at the minute. We then rocked up at the trail race the next day. You asked me if you could run it as a steady run. You had road shoes on in a trail race, and you did it as a steady run. You won the trail race. You surprised me by how quickly, and I guess you surprised me at how good you were on that terrain. I understand that terrain, and I know how hard it is to run quick on that terrain, especially in road shoes. I was pleasantly surprised by that. But that was the catalyst for both yourself and Gemma. And again, it just shows how all these things are so interconnected, almost bizarrely. But I'm so glad they are, because that is the reason we're sat here today. But you made a decision, or certainly we had a discussion around, should we go to the trails? What was your thought process when I approached you with that conversation?
And I get single track minded again. So I was very much like, I'm going to run sub 220. I'm going to knock some time off my 5K. I've still not got a 10K PB, and I want to break 65 minutes for a half. And they're things that I know I can do. I've just not had the right race. And to be fair, probably only raced each of those once or twice properly. So I kind of still felt like there was room in it. And I was just pretty motivated to dive back into it, to be honest. But at the same time, what it was that made a difference for me was the conversation that we had. I remember walking around my living room in Nantwich, in this house that we bought, chatting to you, and you sort of saying like, well, it just really depends what you want to do. You can go to another marathon and you can run PBs and you can race against the clock, and maybe we end up getting down to maybe we run 2:17, maybe you can run 14 flat, whatever. Amazing, that would be really cool. If that's what you want to do, great, let's go and do that. But you're never going to be at the top of that game. But with this physiology and this fitness, if we apply it to the things that you are maybe a little bit more talented at, like or maybe it's just experience, whatever, I don't even really know what talent means, but like, yeah, the more technical terrain and the longer races on the trails, maybe we could actually do something. And you specifically said maybe you could get a GB vest at some point. I think I've had a little scan, and I think like you could be of that sort of European champs type of level. Is that something that you'd want to do? And it didn't really take much thought. It was obviously, that's a really inspiring thing. And like, I also can't kid myself. I'm 37 now. I guess I was 36. I'm young in terms of running, but at the end of the day, like, age is age. And I think longer, traily, make the most of it right now, made all the sense in the world to me than trying to catch up with people who've been doing 400-meter reps on a track since they were 10. It's too big of a gap to close. So yeah, I was pretty easily convinced, actually.
And what I love about that is that the GB vest came this year in Annecy as a result of the process. But the first thing you said to me was, look, the biggest 50K in the world is the OCC at UTMB. I want to qualify for that race. If we're going to do this, I'm all in. And I love that attitude of like, when somebody says they're all in, doesn't matter if it's an elite athlete or whether it's a person doing their first marathon, as long as they give me everything as a coach and they trust the process and we trust each other and we have that relationship, I'm all ears, because that's the best buy-in you can ever get. And when you said, want to qualify for OCC, and Gemma had said exactly the same, and we went on this path to exploring how that was possible. And we went out to, a race first. We went out to Crans, Montana, which was just amazing. Just the best experience ever, like as a group, and just loved it. And despite not qualifying there, it gave us a taste of what was to come. And then obviously we went to Cullinan, and you and Gemma don't know this yet, but I've scheduled a post for next week, because I know on the day that I'm going to be busy. But I've scheduled a post for my social media just talking about this journey a little bit, and almost explain that it doesn't really matter what happens next week, because like the journey we've been on over the last, well, not even 12 months, like 10 months, it's just been incredible. Like, it's been like foot down on the accelerator, learning from each other, like taking us to places that we would never have gone to, meeting people who we'd never have met. So for me, it doesn't matter what happens next week. It's never going to be a failure. There's going to be a lot of learnings that come from it. Absolutely. But when you both performed in Cullinan, it just felt like we all had a purpose. You used to go to these marathons and, yeah, you're always racing for a time. But to be at the top of that race, in the top 3 and qualifying, and seeing you competing, I could just see that in your eyes on the day. Like, yes, you died off a little bit at the end because you were so competitive, but I'd not seen that from you before. And I know, talk about talent, I know that it's personality and it's skills for this terrain that's going to be more suited to you long term. and ultimately you got that qualification, and here we are in the setting.
Yeah, it's funny because I was always a trail runner before, and then I just got so into road running that I was just, I don't know, I felt like now I'm a road runner. This is what I do. So it was a little bit of inertia initially to sort of stick with that. But I think as well, the competitive thing, as soon as you start talking to me, and obviously I respect your opinion and believe what you're saying, and you're saying the potential lies in this place, I'm never going to not do that. If you told me tomorrow we should only be doing 20K or we should go up to 100 miles for next season, I'd be in, because I kind of just want to do the thing that I'm best suited to in the time that I've got to do it, because there's no time to waste. Like, the whole process is fun, and all of it's amazing. Like, it's been really nice mentally as well, running on the trails versus the road, because those marathon sessions are just brutal. Trying to run, man, those 10-mile tempos every week, just like 320s, 315s, whatever. It's hard, man. It's hard. And I liked that it was hard. And I can get something out of the fact it was hard, but it's a lot more fun to go do a steady 3-hour run on trails. It's just more fun. And a big piece of it, I don't even know if I've said this before, but that played into it, there's two things here. There's two parts. So the first part is when we talked about initially on that phone call, and you said, oh, maybe we should go to trails. Let's maybe get a European vest. Maybe we could go and actually have some results, compete and race rather than just running for a time. And we said, all right, yeah, let's do it. Then the next conversation after that, which I always sort of respected you for and appreciated, and I think is important to share like with your audience, because it's totally genuine, is that we had another conversation, which was you basically saying, look, I'll be honest, this is new to me. I'm not the best trail running coach in the world because I don't really know a whole lot about it. I'm really experienced in what I do know. I've got years of experience. I'm really passionate. But what I am going to do, if you want to stay with me and go on this journey, is learn as much as I possibly can, put myself out there. I'm going to do it all myself. I've got Gemma doing the same thing, and I'll give it my absolute best, and we can kind of work it out together. And yeah, I think that was just like, it's kind of what you want to hear, really, isn't it? Because you wouldn't have wanted me to say, oh, actually, no, you're right, I'll go and find someone who's got 10 years experience. But for me, that's all I needed to hear, because I'd way rather take that personal attention, that buy-in, and that relationship that we'd built through like trips to Lisbon and Valencia, and like me getting to know you and Gemma. I talked about finding places and finding those similar people, and me and Nicola hadn't found it in the UK. Like, you guys were two of those people. So it was a no-brainer. Like, it made all the sense in the world. And you tie it in with the travel and the places you get to go to, and the chance to learn and improve together. I just thought, like, that's awesome. I'd always loved writing the training plans and learning about the training myself. So it even felt like I could add a little bit to it as well, which is even more. So I wanted to mention that because that was definitely a factor, and that was something that I definitely remember. And I talked for too long and forgot the other bit. No, can't remember.
That's right.
It'll come back.
You remember it. It's a nice spot to hand over, because yeah, it required a lot of honesty from me, and I'm always honest with people. I think it's the best way to be. And if people want to go and find that more experience, then, you know, great. But I'd rather them. I always say to people, I'm not bothered as long as you're in good hands. Like, I want what's best for athletes, whether it's with me or whether it's with somebody else. In this case, I felt like we could learn together. And one thing that, you know, struck me when I was writing that post, scheduling it for next week, was I did think to myself, like, what qualities do I offer as a coach to people? Like, sometimes you do think that. Same as an athlete, you sometimes you're on cloud nine and you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm brilliant. I can do this, I can do that. But sometimes as an athlete, you question yourself, and you also have those moments as a coach where you think, God, is this really for me? And, you know, I've gone all in on this, and is this the right thing? Like, I literally have changed my coaching career over the last 12 months, and I've absolutely loved it. But I did think when I was writing that, it was something you just touched on. This is what I do offer people, is like, I'm very personable. I like to be very close to my athletes. I have good relationships with them, and I genuinely care about them. Now, I'm not the best physiologist in the world. I'm not the best trail and ultra coach in the world, but I'll do my damn hardest to try and get right the way up there. But in the meantime, I'll beat them on areas that I know I'm better than them at, which is talking to people, being personable, using my personality, and also not being too big and clever enough to say, you know what, James, what do you think of that session? You know, I've created this, but could that be a little bit better? Like you said to me last week, oh, I think I might change that session. I might do this. Yeah, great. You know, but some coaches are like, no, I know everything. I don't know everything. And that's the first thing I accept. But I do know that I offer a lot of qualities, and I know that personality matching is so important. And I know that when I get out there on Thursday, that will still play a part when I see you out on course, that it doesn't then come down to like, oh, can I write you the best session whilst you're going up a bloody 1,000-meter climb? Like, it doesn't work like that. you'll be wanting me to say the right things to you and come up with the right game plan. And I also know that my game planning is absolutely spot on. And I've had that from an athlete, and I pride myself on it as a coach. I've always had that skill, whether it's experience, like you said, whether it's just a bit of learning from other areas, I'm not so sure. But I can back myself in that area too. And they'll come back to help us this time next week. I'm sure they will.
100%. And I mean, as you're talking there, I'm thinking I was actually doing a little bit of reflecting this morning. It's nice when you come away and you get a bit of space from normal life, and especially when you're in such just an incredible place. Like it can't not make you feel small and happy. You just go for a little wander outside, and it's absolutely, you're just lucky to be here. You can't not be happy if you love this sort of place. And I was flicking back through a notebook, going back to the sort of journaling stuff, and I came across something I wrote down at the start of the year. I was looking back at some goals, and there's some stuff about what I want to do through work, with like the European trail races that were established. Well, I'll just say what it was. So I had a few goals. One goal was to confirm 3 events in Europe for RunThrough Trails for 2025. We've got 5, so that's decent. I'll take it. Another one was top 10 at OCC. Audacious, but you got to be brave. And another one was to travel more with Nicola and Amelia and share these experiences with them. And I just sort of sat there quite content that I'm like halfway into the year and I'm nailing those goals, which I feel really good about. And below those goals were some core values and stuff I'd been floating ideas around, because I've been thinking about it a lot at work, and a lot of the stuff that I did at RunThrough last year was around culture in the business, and I wanted to kind of introspect and turn it on myself. So I thought, what are my core values as opposed to like the businesses? And the things that I had written down were honesty, loyalty, generosity, and growth. And I think all of those tie into what we're talking about. So the honesty of saying I might not be the best person for this job. I don't know if I'm going to be able to achieve these things, both from the coach and the athlete, essential, and something that is like the most important thing to me. Loyalty, like if you're with someone and you're going to give something a go, give it a proper go. Like you don't just check. It's the same feeling with when I talk about Mike and Graham and you, even with work with Matt and Ben. I'm just like a very loyal person. I feel like it gives things more value, more reality. In a world where nothing really means anything, you assign kind of meaning through how you act, and by being loyal to things, it kind of makes them feel bigger, and yeah, you get more out of yourself, I suppose. So that was a big thing. Growth, like just want to improve a little bit every day, and that's all we do. That's all we talk about. And yeah, I mean, generosity, I think, well, hopefully I am, but it also applies to you massively. Like, hugely generous person with your time, with your attention. Like, you're very selfless in the way you go about things. So I just think that was the other piece of it. There's a lot of alignment of values. And when you've got that, that's whether that's like recruiting an employee or finding someone to be mates with or having an athlete coach relationship. I don't know. It just like, it rung too true to what I was thinking about this morning. So I had to kind of talk about it.
It's actually a really nice place to round things off, because you mentioned your goals there, like 2 of 3 have been hit. We'll find out this time next week if, I mean, it'll be all over. We'll be in Poco Loco enjoying burger and chips if all's gone well. But regardless of, back again, keep referring back to that social media post. It doesn't matter. Of course, I'd love for you guys to hit your goals. But I know because you've chased that, you've come out this year with a GB vest, because you put the pressure on yourself to say, I want to be top 10 at OCC. Now, because of that, we have done things that maybe we wouldn't have done in the past. So that's led to getting a GB vest. So it doesn't matter what happens next week, because the journey will only continue. If you hit that goal, amazing. But if you don't hit that goal, I know what you're like. You'll go and set another goal and you'll say, right, well, this is the next goal. And we'll move on to that. We'll reflect, we'll learn, and we'll then move on to that. But I think one thing that can be said is you've given yourself your best possible chance to do that, and that aligns to your values, and that's kind of why I think it's a really nice place to round off, because I think so many people forget about those values when they're chasing goals, and they forget even why they're chasing them. And it's really nice that you haven't forgot them and gone, you know what, regardless of what happens, look at this. This is how I'm living my life, and this is how it's playing out. And that's amazing as well. So yeah, a really nice point. I mean, just to finish off before we do round it off, we are a week to the race. We are going to do a preview show for UTMB, and we're going to cross collab again on RunThrough Trails and Your Levels Coaching podcast. That'll come out early next week. But is there anything you want to say to round things off, James, before next week?
Yeah, let's talk about the race for 2 minutes. It's weird, really, because been thinking about a lot about work stuff, thinking a lot about the traveling, just being out here with you guys is just awesome. Got all our family coming out. We're trying to book a table in the middle of Chamonix for Thursday night for 20 people, and the people in the restaurants are like, "What are you talking about?" But there's a lot of cool stuff going on outside of just me running OCC. And it's always weird. We had this conversation in the car on the way to Luton Airport. I stopped at your house, me, you, and Gemma driving to Luton to fly to Lisbon. First time we'd spent like a proper chunk of time together, going to run a half in Lisbon in March last year or whenever it was. And I remember talking about, I'm so motivated and I can think about running and watch live streams and look at training and look at Strava and just live it for months and months on end and not get bored of it. And it's all I think about and it's my main focus. And any spare minute, I'll be thinking about running. And then weirdly, something happens where, and it happens more exaggeratedly, like the bigger the goal is, the closer it gets. And specifically in that last 1 to 2 weeks, it's almost like a weird sort of numbness to it. Like I'm not really thinking about it. And it's not a proactive, I don't want to think about it, so I'm not nervous. It's like I'm not really thinking about it. I would struggle to go and watch a running YouTube video tonight. I don't know what it is. It's really weird. And it's always been the case. And it used to freak me out a bit. I used to think like, am I tired? Have I got a bit overtrained? Have I gone a bit off it? Am I going to have that edge on the day? Because it's all about that mentality in the race. Like that's plays such a huge part of it. There's no physiology to change right now. There's no training to do. It's about arriving fit and healthy, but it's about giving it everything on the day, giving it absolutely everything. And that's like the beauty of racing. And it does always concern me a little bit when I feel kind of flat that week before. Am I going to have that on the start line? But what I do know is every single time I do. So even though I don't feel it now, and I even don't believe it as I'm saying it now, I know I will. So that's kind of an interesting little thing that I've been dealing with the last couple of days, just feeling a bit like, oh yeah, don't know. Am I up for this? Like, am I going to really like smash this race like it's the biggest race of my life? But like, I will. I know that'll come. And you don't really want it to come until the morning of because you don't want to burn all that anxious energy. And then the other piece, I think, I don't want to talk too much about the strategy of the race and the training and all that stuff. We talk about that stuff all the time. Suffice to say, biggest race of the year, incredible course, going to be a massive challenge. And yeah, that goal is lofty. The field is unbelievable. We mentioned London Marathon earlier. I think I placed I don't want to say it wrong, don't go and Google it, but 23rd at London Marathon when I ran 2:21, which that's mad. That's really good. I could run well on Thursday and place worse than that. That's how deep this field is. It's really hard to describe, and that's London Marathon. So yeah, and that's why we're here. Best race in the world, in the best place in the world, against the best people, with the best people I know. So just can't wait to do it. Just ready to relax for the week. And just get into it. Again, I'll be totally transparent as well. Got a couple of little bits, got a slightly sore knee, landed on a rock in a pair of quite minimal shoes a couple of days ago, just jogging down the trail and my heel's a bit sore. That's the sort of stuff that I think every single runner deals with and they just don't talk about. And I am dealing with that. Like I got a rest day today. I was supposed to have an hour run. That's just the truth of it. Kind of hoping it feels good tomorrow and I can run. But if I have to take a couple of rest days, then that's fine too. So yeah, if anyone who's prepping for a race, especially if you're running this week or anything coming up, it's not all roses. It's not all smooth. I don't feel amazing. I don't feel mega fresh and fit. I've got a few little tweaky bits, but I know I'm going to be on that start line, and I'm really confident that when the race starts, I'm going to give it everything I've got and see what happens. I'm just here to make the most of it and give it everything.
Well, as you said, there's no physiology gains now. It's all about freshening up and getting you to that start line as fresh as you possibly can and feeling good. And I know you do switch it on when it comes to race day. You just go into that mode and you are able to switch that. And that is a real quality and a real skill. To round it off, yeah, it is the deepest field of the year. I think you're going to go ranked in around the 60s, which is absolutely mental. But you are on that elite start list. You've qualified out of right, and everybody else who's on that elite start list is here and they've qualified. And that's the beauty of this race. It's the best in the world all coming together. If you want to tune along at home, if you want to follow along, you can download the live trail app. That'll give you live splits if you want to do that. It'll also be live on UTMB live and on YouTube if you want to follow along. It's on Thursday morning. They start at 8:15 French time, so that's 7:15 UK time. They're going to be out, if my calculations are right. James will be out for in and around 6 hours. The leaders will tend to finish around that 5:15 to 5:30. Gemma's going to be out for 7 hours, so you've got a long stream to tune into. The course is behind us. The weather looks like it's going to be amazing. I'm so excited. This has been one of my favorite podcasts. It's definitely been my favorite setting, despite a few flies coming around, a few noises, and a cat coming towards us. But I've genuinely loved it. So thank you very much, mate. I'm going to wish you the best of luck now and say, yes, I hope it all goes well. But I also know that this is just one more race and there's plenty more to come.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, mate. There's nothing left to say at this point. So thanks for having me on. And we'll bash out that UTMB preview podcast tomorrow. And yeah, follow along. Hopefully we're on the other side of it in a week's time with a good result and a good run and a lot of things learned. And yeah, that's it. Nothing more to say.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this cross production of the New Levels Coaching podcast and the Run Through Trails podcast. I feel quite privileged because James usually leads on the Run Through Trails podcast, but we hope the Run Through audience has enjoyed that and got an insight into the man who's putting on these incredible events in the Run Through Trails series, both here at home and now abroad. As always, we hope you enjoy your training. Good luck with your racing, and we'll see you all again very, very soon. Thanks, everyone.